Connecting. Okay. Hi, everyone. Before we start, I'm just going to show a quick Connect Your Ad video about our upcoming programming. And then I will hand it off to Brenda for the presentation. So give me one moment. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski, Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson, Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff, and other initiatives including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's GrowABLE program and our Perspective series. Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society.
Okay. And I also just want to mention that we will be having our Connectra Community Barbecue next Tuesday. It'll be at Jericho Beach from 5 to 7 p.m. So I will drop the link to the Eventbrite registration page in the Zoom link or in the Zoom chat. Okay, that is everything on my end. So I'll pass it on to Brendan now for the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Dyck, and I run a little blog called Guerilla Garden Adventures. And this year, the Canadian Council of Gardens has declared it Year of the Garden, which has been very popular. Apparently, 82% of all Canadians started gardening last year. Now, with the pandemic and the price of groceries, the price of gas, the price of everything, it might actually be cutting into your garden budget. So I'm going to share with you a little PowerPoint and some ideas on how to save some money on your gardening budget and how you can get the most out of your gardening budget for very, very little money. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and at the end, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, and I'm just going to Okay, so the slideshow is not going to run today, so we're just going to go through it manually. So this is about the 3 R's of gardening. There's reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now, one of the main things you're going to do is you want to reduce the price and some of the waste that you have in the garden. Now, first, one of the ways that you can reduce your compost is to start breaking down organic matter. Now, you can actually start with just composting if you have room for a composter. Now, if you don't, you might want to, there's some other options you can do. if you live in a townhouse or if you live in an apartment, you can take your organic waste, roll it up in the blender with a little bit of water, and pour it in your gardens. Now, I would only do this in the winter because decomposing stuff actually smells. So that's one way in the winter, you know, it'll feed your beds, it'll break down by spring. Really good way to do it. There's also these electric composters that fit on your counter. And they're called a food cycler, and it's an electric indoor composter. And it has a bin in there, and in the bin you just put your items, and about 4 hours you have compost, usable compost. Now you can Google this. They sell them on Amazon. They are not exactly a budget-friendly thing, because some of them can cost, you know, $300, $400, $500. Now, to save some money, start yourself a worm bin or like a worm tower. Now, I've just recently become a worm wrangler, and I have some really nice recycling things that I can put in there. I've made it out of toters. So basically, I started with about a dozen worms, and now I've got, I don't know exactly, I haven't counted, but I've got so many that I can usually, they eat about half a bucket ice cream pail of recycled food waste like lettuce and melons. They love apples. So it stops it from ending up in the landfill. It fits into any urban setting. So even if you live in an apartment, you can easily fit one of these bins into your closet. And worm casings, which basically is worm poop, they're one of the best fertilizers. You can sprinkle it direct on your house plants or on your garden, and they're 100% natural, and best of all, they don't smell. A lot of the other types of fertilizers, you know, maybe you put some manure on there, maybe you're using fish fertilizer. Those are horrible, horrible things because they actually smell a lot. This has absolutely zero smell. So this is something that you can go on YouTube do-it-yourself worm bin. There's a whole bunch of different options. That's how I learned how to do mine. It's been in my hallway now for probably about 8 months, and there's absolutely zero smell, and I should be getting some worm compost and using it anytime soon. Now, one of the other ways that you can extend your garden budget is by using kitchen scraps to regrow food. Now, the living lettuce, you can usually get them in supermarkets. And one of those supermarkets that you can go to, Safeway, Freshco, any of the big box stores, you'll see these organically grown in Canada living lettuce, and they come in a 3-pack. So you can rip those apart, wash off the roots, and then just bury them in dirt, or you can just grow them in water. So I pick off all the outside leaves, and when it's just down to the little inside core, that's when I rip them apart into 3 different lettuce heads, and then I just plant them, and they will regrow. And as long as I just keep picking off the outside edge, I actually end up with another head of lettuce. So, I mean, that saves a lot of money. Same thing with green onions. When you buy your green onions at the grocery store, and you can do this all winter indoors as well, is you wash off the green part, like where the roots are, and kind of look at them ahead of time. If they've got some good roots on them, just cut off the green part, use that in your salads or in your omelets, and then leave about an inch on the bottom and just stick them halfway in the dirt. They will regrow. Now, if you don't have a lot of dirt or a lot of room, maybe you live in an apartment, stick them in some water. They'll grow. The only thing is you want to make sure that you change the water often, because otherwise it gets very stinky and it's not a good smell. So I prefer to use dirt, but water will work as well. Sometimes if you're at a superstore, they have some very exotic fruits and vegetables. And sometimes you can find lemongrass, and you just put the little stalks in water, and when it starts to grow roots, again, just stick it in a pot. It makes a really nice house plant, and you can grow it all winter. So that's just a few ways that you can take stuff that you're already buying at the grocery store and extend your gardening budget. Now, there's a few other ways you can reduce your garden budget. One of the big ways that I get a lot of my seeds are from seed swaps. So the seed swaps are they're on Facebook. Sometimes they're on some of the social media groups. You can find some in your local newspapers and a lot of the gardening groups. So, look at those kind of things, because you can maybe, when you buy seeds, like if you buy a package of tomato seeds, there's like 100 or 50 seeds in there. You are not going to grow 50 tomato plants. Well, I might, but most people are not going to grow 50 tomato plants. So grow some of them, and some of them you can trade maybe for some lettuce plants or maybe for some pepper plants. And that way you can buy 1 or 2 seed packages and trade the excess for what you actually, other things that you want or need to grow. Plant swaps are another good thing. Garden clubs are really famous for this. Look for the garden clubs in your area. They have incredible plant sales that are open to the public. That's how they raise funds for their clubs. And it's a really good way to meet like gardening people. And once you join a club, like the garden clubs are usually $25 or thereabouts for a year, but you will learn so much invaluable information, and they're always willing to share plants and harvesting ideas, and it's an incredible opportunity for people. Community gardens, if you have one in your neighborhood, it's a really good way to reduce your budget. Usually for a small fee, you will get a plot, and some community gardens have shared plots and shared fruit trees, so you get a little bit of that. And that, again, helps with your gardening budget. A lot of the community gardens supply you with dirt or manure, so it's less money that you have to put out, even for the small nominal fee that you will pay for your gardening plot. Now, this is not available in all places, but there is such a thing as gleaning. Now, gleaning has some really good opportunities. In the Fraser Valley, there's one called the Fraser Valley Gleaners Association, and there's also something called the Fraser Valley Permaculture Guild, who also run a gleaning program. And what they do is, if a farmer has crops like blueberries, they're picked by a machine. Now, it only picks the outside and the top of it, but there's still lots of viable blueberries left. And so they hire the gleaners to come in. Now, usually a third goes to the farmer, a third goes to whoever's helping pick the crops, and the other third goes to charity, like the food banks or the Seniors Resource Center or other organizations. So it's kind of a win-win situation. You get some fresh produce to take home for yourself, and you're also usually giving back to charity. So if there's a gleaning program in your community, I definitely suggest looking on the internet and looking for that, because you're going to get, maybe you don't have room to grow a whole bunch of blueberries or a whole bunch of apples or plums. Sometimes even personal people, maybe you have an apple tree in your property and you don't have time or the energy or the means to pick all the fruit, and it's just rotting on the ground. You can call a gleaning organization. They have insurance, and they will come down with their people. They will pick it, and again, you will get a third. So definitely something worth checking out. And social media groups. These are my favorite groups. There's free groups. There's Marketplace, which is a huge place for locating gardening things, whether it be plants or trellises or pots or anything that you could think of for your gardening. My only thing to take into consideration as a warning is if you live in Vancouver, Japanese beetles are a problem, and you don't want to be buying something and transporting them from place to place. So you want to be aware of pests if you're buying plants elsewhere. So these are some of the ways that you can really reduce your gardening budget. I have got free things like free containers for growing things in. I've got free paving stones for my garden. So it's definitely worth checking out. So those are just some of the ways that you can help reduce your plant budget for either very little money or no money at all. Now, the next way that you can, one of the other 3 R's for your garden is to reuse stuff. So items that are commonly reused for seed starting are seed starting containers or egg cartons, newspaper and toilet paper rolls. Now, these are not my favorite things to use. I will use them, but they do tend to go moldy. However, I found that takeout or food containers and cups work really, really well. If I go to a barbecue and someone's using those red Solo cups, they are the perfect thing for transplanting seedlings into. So at a barbecue, I'll collect them all and I'll take them home and I'll wash them. Really great. I'll use cardboard containers for chitting potatoes. For those of you who don't know what chitting is, it's when you take the potatoes, your seedling potatoes, and you put it in a little cardboard egg container, and then you let it start sprouts before you plant it. Now, like I said before, you can definitely use recycled plastic containers or planters that you get for free on Marketplace. These work really, really well. There's a few things, though, you might want to know. So when it comes to plastic containers, not all plastic containers are food safe. You want to look for a triangular symbol on the bottom. There's some arrows, and there's going to be a number in the center of it, and it's usually located on the bottom. So safer food plastics include numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5. They're a better choice for planting anything that's edible because they are food safe. And you definitely want to avoid plastics numbered 3, 6, and 7. The reason is because plastics that are numbered 3, 6, and 7 have been recycled so many times, there's no guarantee that there's not lead or aluminum or other contaminants in them. Now, there is people who are studying microplastics, so there are no guarantees that any plastics are safe, but these are considered food safe plastics, so they're definitely a safer bet. We also have wooden pallets. Now, wooden pallets are everywhere, and there's a lot of them available free for the taking. So there's so many things you can do. You can do benches. There's whole Facebook groups dedicated to things that people create out of pallets, and there are some really, really creative things. Now, don't just grab a pallet from behind a store because you think that it's free. Be courteous, knock on the door, say, hey, I seen some pallets outside, or I seen some 5-gallon food grade buckets. Can I help myself? Most businesses are more than happy to let you do that. You can maybe make fencing out of it, for really naughty dogs. So, definitely check out Pinterest. And free wooden pallets, if you can make things for your garden, I definitely suggest doing that. It's free wood, and the price of wood is incredibly expensive right now. Now, out of these, if you're going to make wood planters out of pallets, you don't want to use the pressure-treated wood for edible plants. You want to use untreated natural wood, such as cedar, redwood, or teak. They're all good food safe choices. Stained or painted containers are not recommended for food type plants. Now, on your pallets, there's a little mark on there. It's called an IPPC mark. It's short for International Plant Protection Convention. This is going to indicate whether the pallet has been heat treated, which is good for growing edibles if you're going to make yourself a planter, or if it's been fumigated with methyl bromide, and that's a pesticide. So you definitely don't want to be growing yourself some pesticide soaked wood for things that you're going to grow. So it's going to say HT, it's going to say heat treated. Now, these numbers and stuff, don't worry about having to write them down. I'll be sending links with these little symbols here and with the actual safe numbers for your containers. So that way you will be able to bring them. And with you, it's like a little card, and you'll be able to bring it with you when you go out looking at different containers or at pallets. Now, clothes pegs are an incredible way to reuse things. I like using them for labeling things because as the pot seedlings go up in size, I can just easily reattach it to the next size plant, or I can stick it on like a little tag on the ground, and as the plant moves, I can move it with it. Or if the plant gets really big, I can move the tag out so it's still visible. I do like to put a little bit of clear nail polish on it. That way it doesn't fade when I get it wet once it gets outdoors. I also use them for if I'm covering plants like any of the brassicas, like cauliflower or kale. Bugs like to eat those. So when I first start growing them, I cover them with netting, and I use the clothes pegs to hold it down. Sometimes I use them to hold dried items too while drying them for craft stuff. So clothes pegs I find very handy, whether they be plastic or wood, they're very handy. So if you come across these, definitely put them aside and reuse them. Now, sometimes you find this netted bags and they come around produce. So if you take that netted bag and you cover a vase, it makes a really nice place to put fresh flowers because it holds them all nice and upright. Or you can stretch it over a mason jar and put the ring over, and it acts as what florists call a frog, which again holds your blooms all nice and straight up, makes a lovely bouquet. The little netted organza bag in the middle. Now, sometimes you'll get these at weddings and they'll have little favors in them. I like to keep those because what I use those for is sometimes if you live in a place where there's rats or mice and they're eating your produce, maybe in your greenhouse, these are nice. You can stretch it over top of your tomato as it grows. And then for whatever reason, the rats usually don't like to eat through this. I also like doing it for seeds. If the seeds are starting to ripen up, I'll tie it over top of the seeds themselves while they're ripening, and that way when they drop and they get ripe, then they're not falling all over the ground. So these are just some of the ways you can use these netted bags. Sometimes I'll use the netted bags for storing my own onions when I harvest them, or my potatoes as well. Now, nylons, pantyhose, tights. Not very many people actually wear nylons or pantyhose, but if you do come across some nylons or pantyhoses, they are really good for storing your pots. So if you have your plastic pots and you need to store them in your shed or your garden, and you have limited floor space, just slip them inside a nylon and tie them up. Works really, really well. Gets them up off the ground. Also, you can tie up maybe your onions like that in a bag, or maybe things like, some of your plant tags, things like that, and it gets them up and off the ground. Now, again, when you have the leftover piece after you've tied up, used the legs to hang up your pots, you've got the waste to the crotch piece. Basically, if you tie that off in a knot and you stretch it over top of your cabbages as they start to grow, it'll stretch as the cabbage grows, and then there will be no cabbage moss laying eggs in there, which ends up in caterpillars. Nothing's worse than cutting your cabbage in half and finding half a cabbage caterpillar. It's just not great. And this will definitely help do that. Now, one of the other things that I like to do, especially with children, is make the do-it-yourself cheer pets or make people out of them. So this is basically just a nylon. You put some seeds in the toe, then you put a little bit of moss, you stuff some dirt in there, maybe some leftover fabric, and you tie it off. Glue some googly eyes on there, put a little mouth on there, water it, and it starts to grow grass. Kids love these. Now, I've got really detailed instructions on my website. And again, I will be sending links to this so that you can easily find this. So if there's something that you want to do with someone, especially if you have grandchildren or children, this is a really fun thing to do. They just love it, and they love giving haircuts to the scissors. But hopefully they just keep it to the grass and not their siblings. Now, you might still have some strips of nylon left over. They're really good for tying up and supporting tomato vines, cucumbers, or other vining fruits and vegetables, because they're nice and soft, they stretch, and it doesn't cut off the circulation of the plant. So instead of having to go buy little strips, this is a way that you could reuse them. Socks work just as well. And if you need some more, well, bras work too. So melons, this is someone that I know in one of my gardening groups. His wife had this old bra, and he had took 120 days for these melons to grow. He did not want a chance them falling off the ground. So when, bras supply good support too. So again, reuse whatever you have. Now, sometimes you'll get some little silica packets. Usually they're in food items or in vitamin bottles. So definitely reuse those. So if you collect seeds like I do, you definitely want to put a couple little packages in your leftover seed packs, or even the seeds that you buy, because it's going to help extend the length of your seeds, especially if you live down on the coast where it's very humid. It just keeps things dry and nice. Now, if you're also one of those people that likes to dry flowers, if you want to help dry them a little bit faster and you want to prevent mold as they dry, definitely add a few of these in as well. Now, if you're drying herbs, I grow a lot of chives and tarragon, and I like to dry them in my dehydrator. Excuse me. I also like to sometimes just air dry them. But if I'm drying them, once they're all dried, I'll put them in a mason jar, and I'll put a couple of these silica gels inside. Now, you definitely want to make sure that you're using food grade silica gel if you're going to be adding it to food. You can get silica gel in other hardware items, but I would definitely recommend things that are already found in food items and vitamin bottles. The other kind that are not food grade, they'd be okay to take to the inside of the lid of a granular or powdered fertilizer or a pesticide to prevent condensation and clumping. Now, you want to make sure that you keep the little silica packets, even if they are food grade, out of the reach of children and pets. These are not to be eaten, and it could be a hazard where children and pets could access it. So just be very aware of that. Now, storage totes are one of my favorite things to use. I use them for my worm bin. I created the brown container there is when I lived in my townhouse. I created a self-watering planter, and it can fit a lot of stuff. And most, not all, but most containers, so toters like this, are food grade. So for $10, you can get a really large container. And again, if you Google how to make a self-watering planter from a plastic storage tub, there's literally hundreds of videos on this. And a lot of times you can get these totes for free, again, on Marketplace or on Kijiji or any number of places. So definitely worth checking out. Curtains. Okay, so sheer curtains, they work really well. You can buy expensive Rime garden cloth for protecting your garden against pests, especially things like cabbage moth. But sheer curtains will work really, really well. The scarecrow on the right-hand side of the screen, this was made with 104-inch curtains. And it was just a big post. They wrapped around these pleated curtains around it to make a dress. And when the wind blew, this was actually pretty impressive because they were sheer and light. They just blew in the wind and worked really, really well for a scarecrow. Now, the middle picture is a really incredible gazebo. Where I live now in the Caribou, there's a thing called mosquito season, and they are as big as birds. This was actually taken down on the coast, this gazebo, but if you wanted to, you could hang curtains all the ways around this, either A, to give privacy from your neighbors, or 2, to help protect against mosquitoes. Now, maybe you don't have a gazebo like this, but if you have an old satellite dish, you can make yourself one. Now, this is not my picture, but I was on Marketplace searching out some free gardening stuff, and I came across someone selling this gazebo. And the top of it is one of those old mesh satellite dishes. Now, this looks, quite frankly, like something I would build, but I Googled it. And if you go to Pinterest and you type in satellite dish gazebo, there is some really incredible gazebos. Like, you definitely have to check it out. And for very little money, you too could have a gazebo. There's also on the right-hand side, this is one of the solid dishes and old satellite dishes. And this, they've changed it into a pond. Now, even if you have the mesh ones, I've seen some on Pinterest where they just got some pond liner and they lined it and then they put rocks in it and created themselves a pond. So I'm hoping that when you're thinking about things around your house, these are things that you're going to be thinking, oh, yeah, I've seen that. Now, this gazebo looks a little sketchy, like it might fall down, but I can definitely see possibilities. So when it comes to reusing things, definitely think outside of the box. So now we come to the recycle part. Now, there's this thing called planned obsolescence. And basically, it's a policy of planning or design a product so that it becomes obsolete, like either unfashionable or no longer functional after a certain period of time. So sometimes, you know, like an appliance right now, there's a year guarantee. And it doesn't matter if you spend $1,000 or you spend $3,000, it's a year guarantee and then it's done. 25 years ago, people would buy a stove and they would be able to pass it down to their children. Not anymore. They've made it, they've designed it so that, it's going to last maybe past that year, but it's not going to last 25 years, because if they only sell you one every 25 years, they don't make any money. The other problem is there's something called contrived durability. Now, this is where the lifespan of a product is made artificially short by design. And we're going to talk about cars. So again, my husband has a 1957 Chev Bel Air. Now, his father bought it brand new, right from the car dealership. And my husband is the second owner of that car. And once a year, we take it out and we drive it around, and then we put it back into storage. And this car, I mean, it's from 1957. There is not a car nowadays that is going to last that long, ever. So again, you're going to have more junk to throw out because things are just not meant to last. There's also other things where there's the prevention of repairs. So a lot of manufacturers make it so that replacement parts are either unavailable or so expensive that it's cheaper to buy a new product than fix the old one. Like a printer. By the time you pay to fix a printer, you can buy a brand new one. Or if you buy a coffee machine and you break the glass coffee carafe, it is cheaper usually to replace the whole coffee machine than to buy that carafe. Some cell phone manufacturers will even design the product so that the batteries are sealed enclosures so that you can't replace them. So they don't want really consumable parts to be replaced. So you have to buy a new cell phone. The other thing is keeping up with the Joneses. So a lot of companies focus their marketing plan on getting people to willingly stand in line and spend a lot of money to get the latest and most fashionable products first, even if there's nothing wrong with the old product. Apple phones, when they come out with a new one, people stand in line overnight to get the new one. Their old phone works perfectly fine, but they want new things. Now, this generates huge amounts of stuff for the landfill. And so these are things to take into consideration when you buy things. And if you have things laying around that have become obsolete, or, other people have deemed unfashionable and they want to end up giving it away for free, think of ways to recycle these things. So garden fashion, clothes are one of the biggest things that for fast fashion that end up in landfill. So, maybe you need it for your scarecrow. Maybe it's for Halloween, but for in the garden, I love using it for any of my scarecrows. I actually did a TEDx talk, and my whole outfit, other than the boots, which I bought at Walmart, was from a thrift store. And so, definitely use these things that maybe you're going to throw out. Try and reuse them in the garden whenever possible. Junk, okay? Funky junk, anything can be made into a planter. Now, these are some of my favorite planters. I found an old radio on my friend's land on a big junk pile in the back of her farm. And so I took it home and I made a planter. I entered it in the fair and I won $5 first prize. So, not only did I save something from a landfill, but I also ended up winning $5. So, it really went well. The little chair on the bottom, that was actually mine when I was 12. I had a little vanity set. The vanity set's long since gone, but I still have the chair. And I turned it into a planter. So I get to enjoy it every day, even though it no longer goes with my decor. It's not really something that I fit into my house, but as something that's planted on my deck, incredibly fun. The yellow motorized car. Now, this was one of those battery operated cars that the battery had died. It got thrown on a junk pile. The decals all faded. So I took it and filled it up full of dirt, and I created a planter. The shoes. I mean, these are some red shoes. I had wrecked the heels walking in gravel, and I turned them into a planter. You know, something really simple. I mean, this is because I wrecked them, they were going to end up in a landfill. There's no way that anyone's going to want some wrecked shoes. But I mean, I was able to save it from a landfill for a little bit longer anyways. And the mailbox on top, again, this was an old piece of junk my neighbor had, and she painted it and planted it. I mean, these are just things that you see that you can easily turn into a planter. Here's another chair again. This was one of my neighbors, and she liked it so much, my planter, that I created one for her. Rubber boots. I mean, these are like either, you know, someone's growing out of them. These ones had holes in them. You have to punch your holes through them. There's an old washboard that I found at a thrift store. These are, again, just fun things. This coffee maker was our favorite coffee maker, and then it died. Now, and the coffee maker that we had, it wouldn't fit the carafe, and it was going to end up in a landfill. So basically, I turned it into a planter. Now, again, I entered it in the fair, and I won second prize that year, which was $3. But again, just junk. Fun junk turned into a planter. Purses, again, these are, you know, they've kind of lived their lifespan. They get a hole, maybe the handle falls off, the lining's ripped. Really good, easy hanging planters, especially if you live in a small space. Tires. Now, tires, I don't know if I would plant edibles in them, because their tires used to be made of rubber and steel. Now they've got a lot of recycled things in them, so there might be carcinogenics in it. But if you Google tire planters, there's a lot of really fun ideas for flowers and things. And again, saving something from the landfill and turning it into something fun. Now, trellis and fencing options. If you garden, there's always trellises and things to look at. Maybe there's an old bed frame. They make really good trellises, especially the antique ones. The one that's on the lower left-hand side, that's one of the old bed springs. Once the mattress has been ripped apart, it has the most interesting pattern. Old wooden laundry racks. Now, I have one of these. I grow cucumbers up. This is actually mine that was in my garage when I lived in a townhouse, because I didn't have room to really store trellises, but this folded up flat and could easily go away. I think I paid like maybe $4 on Marketplace for this. And it really worked well, because if you grow your cucumbers like up the trellis, it doesn't take up as much room either, which leaves you room for planting other things. The top right-hand corner, that's rebar. Now, a lot of construction sites have rebar, or sometimes you can get something called cattle paneling if you live in a rural area at some of the feed stores. Rebar, any construction site will have it. Again, you don't just go helping yourself, but you know, because maybe they need it or for something else. But a lot of times they have spare pieces of metal. And if you live on the West Coast, it's the rainy season, 10 months out of the year at least, and metal never ever rots, which is nice about some of the other metal bed frames as well. They make really good gates. They don't they may rust, but they don't really fall apart. So if you're on a construction zone, you see some rebar, ask them. A lot of times they're more than happy to give you some rebar. And it's just metal pipes, and it works really well. Now, there's all sorts of other recycled garden decor you can find. Maybe old aquarium rocks and shells, things like that. Maybe tin cans that you create little tin can wind chimes for. Broken pots. If you have broken pots, this fairy garden I made out of broken pots, and that's right in the middle. And it's just some bunch of terracotta pots that I broke, and I just saved all the pieces. And then I glued them together with something called E6000. It's available at any hardware store. And you don't want to get this stuff on anything because it is permanent. This garden is still together after 6 years. It stays outside all the time. Right now it's missing the moss because the little birds all stole the moss and made nests out of it. But it lasts forever. So it's a really good way to reuse your pots and create something beautiful. Now in the top right-hand corner, you see that little bit of pinky brown? What this is I had a friend who, when she renovated her bathroom, she had this pink, dusty pink sunken tub. And it was very outdated. And she really hates pink. So when she redid the bathroom, she dug a big hole, she put some gravel and some sand in it, and she sunk the tub in there. And then she planted all these daylilies and some alyssum and other things all around to create this pond. And it was really easy in the winter because she just pulled the plug and it drained out. So it was a really incredible pond that she had. Or like other recycled decor, like on the bottom right-hand corner, it looks like a little girl bending over smelling flowers. But all that is some two old 2x4s stuck into some rubber boots. It's got a piece of 2x4 connecting it, and it just has a raincoat stuck over top. So it looks like there is an actual person, but it's not. It's just some hidden 2x4s with a raincoat hanging over it and a pair of pants pulled on with some boots. These are really inexpensive ways to dress up your garden. Now, maybe you're that neighbor who has an old junker in the front yard, you're getting calls from the city, or maybe your neighbor's one of those people. Well, there's always neighbor enhancement, plant it up, decorate it. This is really, anything can be turned into a planter. This is all about using what you have and looking around to what you can actually use for very little money to create the best things that you can. Now, I hope that today that you were able to gather some ideas, come up with things that you can do to help with your budget, to recycle things, to reduce and to reuse stuff. Now, I have always had different ideas and adventures, and I have a website, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. So I hope today that I inspired you to do those things, reduce, reuse, and recycle things in the garden and create the best garden that you can. And I will be sending links to do all that. So till then, happy gardening, and we'll start seeing if there's any questions from anybody. Thanks so much. Hello?
Hi.
Okay.
Sorry you cut out for a moment there. What were you saying?
Okay, is there any questions or?
If there are no questions, would you like to wrap up here for the day?
Sure, that would be great. So what I'll do is I'll send an email. I'll send an email with all the links that I talked about. And that way, I said, there is so many ways that you can save money. And I hope that I inspired some of you to do some of those things.
All right. Well, thank you for the fantastic presentation. If you send me that email, I can forward it to everyone who participated and attended.
Sure,
Is there...
I'll be more than happy to do that. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.